Do you ever want to dive deeper into the Bible, but you just don't know where to begin or struggle to feel like you even have the time? When you read the Bible, do you get frustrated because you know there is so much more in there? You just have no clue how to get it out. Or maybe you just want to know the Bible better and you're looking for any resource to help. Well, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the Context and Color of the Bible podcast. We are two sisters. I'm Erica.
And I'm Veronica.
We love to study the Bible and help others understand it better. When it comes to our own study of Scripture, we have found that in bringing back the context of Scripture, it adds so much to our understanding. It actually adds color to the black and white pages of the text. So, Veronica, we are not in my basement. We are actually in someone else's basement today. I have the pleasure of introducing our real first guest, besides my husband. This is in person. Okay. Yes, she has been my friend, my mentor, my boss, a listener when I've needed, like, Shannon, I need help. But I'm thrilled. She's a podcaster herself, a speaker. I'm thrilled to introduce Shannon Popkin today to our listeners, which we've mentioned you before on the podcast, but now we actually get to hear you. So thank you so much for coming.
Well, thanks
and
for
being on our podcast.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. This is such a delight. And Veronica, it's been fun to get to know you a little bit too through Erica. Like, this is just, I feel like, Erica, we have this partnership in the gospel, you know? I mean, really, we talk about Bible teaching, your rich background with studying at the Jerusalem University College. Did I get that right? And just having all this like insight with the history and the geography of the Bible has just been so helpful for me. I actually just wrote my acknowledgments for my latest book and mentioned your name in there.
Thank you. That's sweet. Well, I didn't do much, but I enjoyed reading your latest book. The little bit I got to, Shannon, I cannot wait for it to come out.
You're so kind. No, you were one of my beta readers. And then you did a couple episodes on Jonah with me. And those really, really helped. I mean, you and Brian.
I used the commentary.
Yes, exactly. But no, I those were so helpful for me. And, just writing that chapter. I'm so excited about that chapter. I think it might be my favorite one, although you could talk me into any of them.
Do you want to share just a little bit about your new book that's coming out?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's, the new title is Kinda Judgy, right. Finding Mercy for Myself and Others in 6 Stories of the Bible. So I looked at these 6 different stories and what they tell us about the truth about God's judgment and His mercy, and then how should we live like those things are true, whether we're feeling judged by God, feeling judged by other people, or whether we've become kind of like the Pharisees and we're judging others and looking down our noses at them. So yeah, I think this will be a really helpful book because I do think many of us are kind of judgy.
Yeah. I know the chapter I read, I was very convicted. It was like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way, Shannon. It was very well written, very convicting, but like not in such a way that I didn't want to keep reading. Yeah. It's like, okay, I need to keep reading to find out other places where, Lord, you are speaking to me, and I do need to start giving grace and mercy more. It was very well done. So I'm excited for the whole book.
Thank you. I hope that it will be well received. It was a blessing for me to write it. So,
well, I'm going to do my normal. I'm taking the microphone now.
But sorry, you have to share.
No, we're used to this. But what I like is how Erica's saying, from your story, reading your book, there's stories in there that convicted her. And it's like, stories are such a good teaching tool that I don't know we often think about it. We think about stories being entertaining. I love to read books. People read just because it's enjoyable. It's relaxing. We watch movies because that's a story. Yeah. But you don't walk away from books and movies always going, oh, I learned a lesson here. A really good one, you'll walk away, especially good books, will have those takeaway lessons that you go, oh, I needed to be reminded of that. Yeah. But in that opens us up to, so there's obviously stories in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, and let me just go back on to something you just said. Like, I think it actually would be good for us to look at the movies that we watch, the TV shows, the things that we're consuming, not just as entertainment, because there are messages. We are being taught things. And, if we were to be a little more mindful about that, I think we would notice we're actually being influenced by truth, truth statements, truth ideas that are being fed to us. And the Bible has that same intention. It's like God is using story to show, not tell. And we're meant to read the story parts of the Bible. Now, the whole Bible is not that form of literature. There's a whole bunch of different forms of literature of the Bible, but the parts that are story, that are narrative, like we are supposed to read them that way.
Right.
And so it's not wrong for us to just enjoy the story components and to imagine. I think that's really what the author is asking us to do. And the more detailed they are about, like when they say something like, and behold, or now, like Genesis 3, now the serpent was more crafty than any of the other beasts of the field. Like we're supposed to enter in, like, imagine and feel the story and to relate to it that way. And actually, if we don't, we're missing something. If we are, let me just give you an example. I wrote a book on the life of Sarah, which Erica, I know you did a review of that. It was so helpful, but, there was a part where I was being challenged. Editorial teams, they're always wanting to like make sure that it's really good. And I so appreciate my publishers, like nothing bad about anyone that I've ever worked with. I've always enjoyed my editors, but there was one part of the editorial reviewer is getting a little pushback on saying that for Sarah to include Hagar in their marriage, like I was saying that was a misstep. I was saying that was a lack of faith. And we had already made the point that Abraham and Sarah, they didn't know God. They were learning about him. And so as the story unfolds, like we know way more about them than Abraham and Sarah did at the beginning. And so the reviewer was saying, I mean, wouldn't that be true in the sense of Hagar? Like they didn't know this was just culturally acceptable to take a second wife when the first wife wasn't able to produce children. And so like, this is just what you do culturally. And they were just following cultural norms. They didn't have the 10 Commandments yet. They didn't, so like, how would they know otherwise? And so can we really criticize? But how I responded was, no, this is a story. This is a story written by an author. This is a literary genre. And Moses is not just chronicling different events. Moses is choosing episodes, and he's showing us that our forefathers of the faith, that they had moments of great faith and they had moments where there were lapses and they didn't walk in faith. And this is one of them. And so we're watching, this is the hero's journey, and this is where the conflict comes in. And so this self-reliance. Actually, this is a story. Yes, it's a story about two people, but it's also a salvation story. Like it's like, this is the gospel just beginning, where God has promised, I will send, this snake crusher, this savior. And we don't know where that's going to come from. Like which seed in Genesis, we're looking for that seed. It's like the only clue we get at the beginning is that the savior is going to be born of a woman. So that's why we have all of these Toledot. Am I saying that correctly? These Toledot, where we're looking at these different generations because we're looking for that seed. That's as we turn the pages. And so then we have this story where God promises this barren couple, I'm going to provide, I'm going to make of you a great nation. So we know there's going to be a baby. And our assumption is, this might be the savior, right? And so how is the savior going to come? Is it going to come through self-reliance? Like I have to do something. And God's like, no, because he starts out in Genesis 12, I will make of you a great nation. And in Genesis 16, that's where the Hagar, I call it the Hagar solution. So that's where Sarah is saying, perhaps I can. And so see, this is a misstep of faith. That's the storyteller is taking us on a journey and challenging, like, no, this is this story of faith, this story of salvation. This is not like you have to produce salvation for yourself. And when you try, you're actually setting up a competition between self-reliance and faith. And that's what we see in Ishmael and Isaac. So sorry, long-winded answer, but
no, but it's such a good point. There's a story there that I've never even really considered of what are the lessons other than just how I think the takeaway is don't have more than one wife.
Yes, no, we're not. Yeah, that's not the point, right?
But there's so much there that it's like if someone takes it and tweaks it just a little bit, you're like, oh, there's so many lessons there. And it just comes so much bigger and more into my own life of, Yeah, I do that too.
Yeah, no, the self-reliance thing. I mean, that was one of my biggest takeaways with that book. And that, yeah, just her story is like, she was trying so hard and she was trying to deal with her own shame of what she couldn't produce. And yet God's like, I will, but we need to wait. And so faith is waiting when we don't know how it's going to turn out. And I think that these stories of the Bible are meant to be read as literature. And I think what's beautiful about them is that think about who is the general editor of the Bible. It's God. And who is our creator? It's God. I think he knows that we are these story-driven creatures. He's the one who made our brains. And so he's overseeing the Bible, to a much, much smaller degree. I experienced that same sort of like inspiration of like, oh, what will my next book be about? And I feel like in his spirit inspires me, and as I'm dreaming about it and I'm thinking about it, he definitely is influencing that process. And that's our whole Bible in a much more significant way is being influenced, because this is God inspiring these holy, men of old, these writers to write. And so this was God's idea. It was his design, not only in the different episodes of the individual stories in the Bible, but also in this overarching narrative. I mean, there's no book like the Bible, 66 books where it is all telling one overarching story where these authors didn't know each other. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure you've talked a lot about that on your show, but I'm just curious, what's your favorite story of the Bible?
Oh,
The current one I'm studying.
I know. I was going to say it's normally the one I'm studying. So Deuteronomy, I'm not sure it's totally a story right now, but
Well, I guess now that I think about that, I love Exodus. I love the Exodus event. Every time I study it or talk about it or think about it, I feel like there's always more that comes out of that story. I love that story.
Like why? What are you?
It's just such a picture of how God works and moves, and he saves his people out of Egypt and then brings them into covenant with him and tells them, okay, here's how you live. And as I get this picture, and we've talked about this on the podcast, that as they're walking out of Egypt and he's just battled the gods of Pharaoh, and it's like he is standing over them going, I'm the victor. I did this. Bring it on. Who wants to challenge me now? Next, and Pharaoh and Egypt are just bloodied and beaten, and their gods are just decimated. And so every time someone gets saved today, they're being brought out of the kingdom of darkness into his kingdom. And each time it's like God is standing over the person going, I did this. Yeah. I saved this one. This is another trophy on my mantle that look what I can do. I'm God. It's just such this overwhelming introduction of God into world history that makes you go, he's God. And so I love that picture.
I love that too. Introduction into world history, because these aren't just stories just like that someone made up. These are these actual, and God is interacting with the narrative as it unfolds. And so you're right. He is introducing himself into the world's narrative, the history of the whole world, which he introduced the world itself, which that only makes sense. But I thought your series on Exodus was amazing. In fact,
thank you.
My son is a middle school director, and he's teaching through the book of Exodus. And I just sent him your episodes. I'm like, you gotta listen. And what you just said was one of the most powerful takeaways. I just thought of God going toe to toe with, bring it on. I'm gonna be, over these gods. But also this story of moving from slavery to freedom, right? From that, the Red Sea was like a birth canal, there's imagery, right? With the going through the water, where they're entering this new life, and it's a new life collectively as a people of God. And so then the 10 Commandments, they're like marriage vows, This is like there's this covenant, and they're entering this relationship, and these are gifts. Like God's like, I want it to go so well for you. And this is going to be a beautiful way to live. And, I just love, love the 10 commandments and especially the Sabbath. I'm not like Pharaoh. I'm not going to work you to death. My people will rest. This is how I'm giving you this beautiful new life. So yeah, I mean, there's so much in that story. Do you have another one, Veronica?
No, all of it. I just go, I love that God gave us all these pictures. Because that's what sticks. And I think that's why Exodus really resonates with people, is because that is such a powerful picture. The other picture I have then is just when we did Habakkuk with Erica's Brian, of just how it ends with God as that warrior king coming back. And it sticks where Habakkuk, it's like, oh, it's actually a story. And it's that conversation with God of, how long are we going to suffer? And why are you allowing this? And God going, okay, you want to know how it's going to end? Because sometimes Erica does it. She jumps to the end of a book because she likes to know the ending. And it's like, no, I mean, to me, I go, you got to savor and build up. But I don't savor. I'm rushing through to get to the end because it's like, I need to know how this all works out. And just that God gives us that continual picture of, trust me, it's going to end well. If you're on my side, if you're in my kingdom, there's peace and comfort, because you read those books and you go, oh, I can look around and go, everything looks dark and bleak and horrible, and get really discouraged. But if I keep that picture of Habakkuk 3 of God is the warrior king and he's coming back one day.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, I can rest and have peace in this.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he wants us to know the end of the story. He does not think we are cheating when we flip
I do.
No, I mean, because really, if you know the ending, you can flip back to wherever you are in the story and find, I mean, when you're suffering, like in Habakkuk's day, you want to have some hope. And so many of us were looking for that hope. And the storyline of the Bible gives that to us. And Jesus, I think what's so interesting about Jesus is that the first time he doesn't come as the warrior king.
Right.
That that's what we're kind of expecting. And that doesn't mean he won't. The imagery in Revelation is he will come again as a warrior king. But Tim Keller says that if he first came as the warrior king, he would have just annihilated everyone and there would be no one to save, right? So he had to come first as the suffering servant so that there would be someone to save. But we have such hope because of him, because he came as the suffering servant. And so I think the stories of Jesus are probably my favorite in the Bible. I love just what they reveal, because, Jesus is the exact representation of God, and his character is so complex. And I feel like I'm still learning to read these stories, because you have these ideas as a kid, and then you grow up and you start understanding, I understand a little bit more about, I'm not a great history person, but like understanding Rome and what was happening politically. I just actually, for the book we were talking about, I went back to the resurrection and I realized I really haven't just soaked my heart in the story of the cross and the resurrection. Like every year at Easter, we celebrate this, but I just haven't let it grip me. And so anyway, I just think the stories of Jesus, one of my favorites is him walking on the water. Where in Mark's version of the story, it says that, Jesus they see him walking on the waves, and Mark says he meant to pass by them. And you're like, oh, okay, wait a second. When it's the fourth watch of the night, that's between 3 and 6 in the morning. When I've been out in a storm, like about to die, like feeling like my life is going to end here. The last thing I want is for Jesus to just like walk by me. I want him to come to me. I want him to stop the storm. I want him to be with me in the storm, whatever. And he does at the end of the story, he does all those things. But what Jesus decides is the most important thing for them to see is for him to walk by them. Like he's displaying his glory. And at the end of Matthew's version of the story, they say, surely this is the Son of God. And so this is the big reveal. This is the big moment. God is showing, not just telling us. And the other thing I love about that story is Jesus could have on a sunny day stepped out and said, haha, look what I can do.
Right.
Why didn't he? Didn't he? I think because he knows that we're so much less likely to believe that we're not in control on a sunny day. It's like it takes that storm. It takes why wait so long? Why wait there out there all night? But we need convincing that we're not actually the ones who are in control. But then in those storms, in the darkness, with the wind and the waves, we're more convinced than ever that we're not the ones who are in control. But then he's able to show us, yeah, but I am. I'm not affected by gravity. I'm not affected by this storm. I am God. And that's what is being revealed in this story. It's a beautiful story. I think all of them, each one, there's intentionality. And, God is the general author, that general editor who's revealing something amazing to us.
But I like it too, because then you go, okay, if there's a story in there I don't completely understand, okay, dig.
Yes.
That encouragement to, because I'm sure everyone listening to your podcast, listening to our podcast, are people who are studying. And it's like, you know what? There's stories and things you come across and you go, I don't get this and I don't like it.
Yeah.
Well, dig a little deeper. Why don't you like it? Erica hates 1 Kings 21.
I do.
Which
King Ahab and Naboth's vineyard. That bugs her. But there's such a good story of repentance.
But he doesn't repent.
Okay, Erica, he slightly kind of repents.
Okay, I got to have you on my show to talk about that one.
But it's such a good, because there's things that just grate us. And it's like, you know what, when it comes to the Bible, don't just put it down and walk away. I mean, maybe you have to for a little bit. I know Erica's had to do that with 1 Kings 21 and Judges. But you go, okay, God, there's a reason you put this story in here. Why? And kind of pushing into God and going, I need to know why you did this. Why you put it, because I'm sure given all the 1,500 years from Genesis to whenever it was complete, written, there's plenty of stories that weren't included.
Oh yeah. This was selective, right?
You picked, just like your editor's making you pick. Switch your words here. Why did you do that, God? What's the purpose here? And when I don't like it, when I don't understand, don't walk away. Keep digging.
Yeah. And so it's great when we're talking about stories, it's great to keep three contexts in mind. First of all, that overarching narrative. How does this story, where does it come in the overarching, creation, fall, redemption, and consummation? Where does this story fall? And then thinking about the more like the book, the genre, and the book itself, like where does this story come in that? And then its immediate context of like what came before and after. And so just those are great ways, if there's a story that's sticking in your throat and you're just like, what is going on here? Look at those three contexts because you may get some insight, that way. But I think stories are also really great containers of truth. We talked about how they're memorable. Like we're designed, I think God designed us as story-driven creatures where that's the way our brains work. Like brain science shows that the things our brains light up when we are interacting with story. And this is really interesting too. I learned this in Talk Like TED. They call it neurocoupling. I've talked about this a couple times on my podcast where the storyteller, the part of my brain as a storyteller that's lighting up, and then the audience, whoever's in my audience, the part of their brain that's lighting up, it's the same. Oh. So when I'm teaching, I'm using one part and they're using a different part. But when I'm telling a story, we're kind of like, it's this coupling exercise. Like we're entering in, we're experiencing something together. You're identifying with me. You're feeling emotion with me. You're responding, I'm getting you to feel and to see the same way that I feel. And so when you back up and think of God that way, like he's doing this neural coupling thing with us.
He's wanting that.
I know.
He designed us to do that.
Yes.
You go, okay, God, then
right.
This is why we need stories.
Yes,
this is why stories are so powerful.
Yeah. He wants us to feel something he feels, to know something he knows, to like react in the same way that he reacts. When I studied Noah and the flood for this book, Kind of Judgy, I think most people come to the story of the flood kind of like, God is so harsh, so cruel. I mean, he wiped the face of the earth. But when we enter that story, we're actually getting God's perspective. Now, God looked out on the face of the earth and he saw that the intentions of mankind was only always evil. I mean, imagine that from God's perspective. He's kind of drawing us into like, here's how I see this. Like I created man in my own image. And I said, multiply across the face of the earth so that you can spread my glory, so that the whole world would know how good I am, how kind I am, how creative I am. Like God wanted the whole world to know him. And that's what's happening. The people are spreading across the face of the earth, but they're not spreading God's image. They're spreading this wickedness, this evil, like the antithesis of God. That's what's spreading. And so God wants us to see it from his perspective and to feel like it says that he was grieved. He was sad that he even made mankind. Like this was awful. It grieved his heart. And so we should feel some of that grief. And when we approach it that way, in this kind of neurocoupling sort of way, well, then we read the story correctly. Then we see, oh, wait a minute. God was so good to provide an ark. That the story didn't just end. He wanted us to know more than just about his judgment and his power. If that's all he wanted us to know in that story, it would be like there was a flood, the end, right? Our Bible would be a much shorter story. But no, he wanted the story to go on. And so he also tells, like, if you look at the word count of the story of the flood, it's actually a very long, complex story because there's a lot of chiastic structuring in it. But if you look at the word count, the most ink is given to the ark and what's going to come after the ark. It's like very little, God didn't have to plan the judgment. He just basically unpinned creation and just let the waters fall back into chaos. Like that took no planning at all. But he is, throughout the whole thing, he's planning this creation 2.0. He's like getting ready for a reset. So anyway, that's God's heart. He wants for us to begin again. He doesn't want us to know him as this God of harsh judgment. He wants us to know him as the merciful God. The ark rises above the waters of judgment. That's what he wants us to know about himself. So anyway, I just think like coming to these stories, knowing that God was involved, right, and that he is a storytelling God, and that he chose a people like you guys, the color and context of the Bible. Did I get that right? Context and color of the Bible. And so it's like, you want us to know, like, these books of the Bible, they all come out of a specific group of people who have a culture, who have a language, and their language is colorful. And the history of the Hebrew people is they are a storytelling people. That's the way that they communicated their history. And even in just their culture, they think in stories. Am I correct on this? Like, there's this quote, let's see, Kenneth Bailey, we all love Kenneth Bailey, right? He says that in the Middle East, from the beggar to the king, the primary method of creating meaning is through metaphor and story. This is what's true about the Middle East. It's like we put more emphasis as Western thinkers on thinking abstractly, and thinking orderly, like an outline, right? We if we're going to say something really important, we're going to have a thesis statement. We're going to prove it with all of these abstract ideas. Logic, because of A and B, whatever. That's the way that we think. And that's what we think. If we're going to say something important, that's how we're going to say it. But in the Middle East, it's the opposite. If you're going to say something really important, you're going to package it in a story. Is that true? What comment on that? I'm curious what you guys would say about that.
That is so true. But I think that's partially why Jesus taught in parables, because that was the way they thought. If you read anything the rabbis write, if you get into the Talmud, the Mishnah, like they are filled with stories. And then at the end, you'll get like sometimes something that sums it up, or sometimes it's just story after story as they're trying to prove their point. They don't think there's a difference between Western and Eastern culture. And so appreciating that helps you to go, we talk about God being omnipotent, but they say the Lord is a strong tower. Right. The righteous run into it and are saved. We talk about God loving the world, but they talk about, God creating the world, and they give you a picture of what that looks like, which to me it just sticks in my brain so much more. So I appreciate that perspective. I love the stories.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're entering into a different culture when we open our Bible. I think we forget that, it's just like if I were to pick up some other Middle Eastern book, like I would never forget the fact that it was written by a Middle Eastern author in a different language that's been translated to me. Like I just wouldn't forget that. Can you think of an example? I'm trying to. I'm
just thinking like when you get like AI to like translate from like Chinese instructions to English instructions.
Or even
and
you
it's
get
like,
the instructions in your box and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, someone translated this.
It's like,
This
oh,
makes
I
no
don't
sense.
think they got the right meaning right there.
Exactly. But even, like if we were to go over to Europe, we would be keeping in mind, like, okay, we have to remember they drive on the left side of the road. Like we just would have this mindset of like, I'm entering your territory. When I went to Jordan, our friends took us out for dinner and they were like, okay, they're going to be bringing food to the table and they're going to keep bringing it. Like, you have to leave food. Otherwise, they're just going to, if you finish what's there, they will bring another, so we're always going to just leave a couple of pieces of bread in the basket. Otherwise, they'll just keep bringing it. I was like, oh, good to know. Right. Because I'm sure I could eat a couple baskets of that bread. But so it's like you need to know cultural things. And so one of those cultural things is how important story is. And just as if they're telling a story, they are telling you the most important thing. And so not to like reduce that, we think of stories as like childish or, fairy tales. We don't put as much emphasis. So I think just even the fact that we're thinking about stories as an important part of our Bible study. This is looking at the story and recognizing that it's not a didactic piece of literature where I'm not coming to this story, like you said with Hagar. It's like, I'm not coming to this, like, this is God's design for marriage. Like, no. Right. Like, I'm coming to this, like, I'm learning about, this is a person who's coming to know God and coming to walk by faith. And this is their journey. And so God is showing me things, not being so forthright, not so overt. Like even Jesus, when he was asked, who's my neighbor, he told a story about the Good Samaritan, right? And so the guy who was asking was like saying, tell me, like, what are the parameters? Who do I have to be good to? And Jesus,
where's my checklist?
Exactly. Like, where's, how big is my neighborhood? Where are the boundary lines? And Jesus tells them this story. And what's surprising is that you identify with the guy who's bleeding. And then when you're bleeding on the side of the road and you're asking, who's my neighbor? Well, that's a shift in perspective, right? Then you want anybody to be your neighbor. You're thankful that the Samaritan is your neighbor. And so Jesus is like, like you said, with the Talmud and the Mishnah, like it's a series, they use story after story after story to try to draw out, like it's more than just from the sidelines looking in. They're trying to engage with your heart. They're trying to invoke emotion, compassion, empathy for the person bleeding, like you're identifying with that person. And that's really what stories do. They interact with our heart and our emotions, and God is an emotional God. And so you're not wrong to feel these stories. And in fact, you're very, very right to do so. So I think they're super memorable and they're easy for us to retrieve. And I think we should retrieve the stories of the Bible with that in mind. Like what is a story I can go to that helps me to sort through what's true and what's right?
Yeah, that's a good... because sometimes I go, I don't know that the Bible tells me everything to do, and it doesn't. But if I go, is there a story that I can bring into this? I can see some truths and take some application from that. I'm thinking of just, as you were talking about that, of King David. When Nathan came to him, he didn't just come and go, hey, you're wrong.
Yes.
He came with a story that tugged at David's heartstrings and got David to react to a story. And then it was like, and here's the twist.
Yes. Yeah.
You're that man. I mean, just how...
You are the man.
Yeah.
Storytelling.
Yes. At its finest. I mean, that's what the story's there to do. And going back to what we said at the beginning, how you said, no, if we pay attention to the movies, what are the truths we're pulling out? Because whether we realize it or not, we're pulling those truths or those lies out of that story.
It's true.
We're pulling application from it. And it's like, okay, if I'm going to let stuff fill my mind, it needs to be the stories of Scripture, because then at least it's giving God something to work with.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, and stories are so easy to retain. I mean, like, look, I've got a list here. The Tower of Babel is 230 words. The Prodigal Son is 514 words in my ESV translation. The story of Jesus dying on the cross in Matthew is 120 words.
Wow.
Like, there's such a brevity, but just think of all of the truth that is so packaged up in each one of those stories. Like, we're learning about God, about mankind, about ourselves. Like, there's so much contained. And if we can think of each of these stories like a container for truth, like, just imagine, once you know the story, you can just retrieve it from your mind. Like, there are a dozen stories I could just tell you right now that I have stored up in my mind, which is how the Hebrew people would have, they would have been able to just immediately, and it's not a verbatim thing. It's just like, I know the story and our minds can package that up. We can recall stories. It's because we're engaging our imaginations. We're picturing things. And so each of these little stories, we're packaging up really good, rich theology. And if you can think of these, like, think of your mind like a shelf on your mind and all these containers, each story is like a container and it's holding together all of these rich gems, these beautiful truths about the gospel. And it packages them in a way that they're accessible even for children. I could tell a little kid the story of the Tower of Babel and they would get it. But you and I could have an hour-long conversation and we would not scratch the depths or we wouldn't get to the depths of how important that story is and all of the meaning behind it. And so we'll spend the rest of our lives contemplating these stories and enjoying them and returning to them for the truth.
Such good application.
The rabbis talk about when the Messiah comes, he'll explain even the spaces between the words. And I just love that.
Oh, wow.
Like you said, Shannon, we will spend all eternity going over these stories and just constantly mining the truth that God has placed in them. And I think that's a great way to spend eternity, personally.
Yeah.
But why not start now? Why wait? Like, why not build up so that you're that much farther when you enter eternity? Start now studying the stories, finding out what's in there, and then you've got something to build on when you enter.
Well, that's how I feel when I talk with you guys. Like, there's so much there that I might miss, And so, like, this is a great way to use our imaginations and use our mind. And I think it takes practice, like, so when you're going for a walk or you're going for a drive, why not think through some of your favorite stories of the Bible? And why not introduce those in conversation? Because they provide a really great way to talk to other people and share truth. Like, I've got a couple neighbor kids who I know their families, they're not families of faith. And so when I get a chance, when they wander into my yard and they're petting my dogs or whatever, I'll say, hey, can I tell you another story? And I just tell them these little stories because I know they're memorable and they're powerful and you never know. They may take root. They may invite other questions and spark imagination. And I've got this window of time when they're kids and they still come over and see me, right? And so if you're a grandma and you're concerned about your grandkids or maybe they are a God-loving family, I mean, these are ways that you can invest in the next generation. You can invest in your kids, in your marriage, in, your friendships. And I think in today's day and age, it's like, really, I think there's a lot of division. We're looking at people going no contact and, there's all like, I feel like you guys both have coming to be young adult children. Erica, how old is your oldest?
17.
Okay. So you're getting there and you've got a young adult child. I've got 3 young adult children. And I think what happens is, it's just harder to talk. Like when they're little, I can talk to them about truth. I can, but now it's like, we're all adults here and I don't want to be like this teacherly kind of, if there have been times, let's say, that I just want to re-preach the sermon that I just heard because they really need to hear it. And if I do that, what's going to happen?
They're going to shut you down.
Yeah. Like they don't want to hear that. But
I'm old, Mom. I don't need a lecture anymore.
Exactly. But if I can say, hey, like there's this, what about the story of this or that, so like, let's say you're talking with someone and they're saying, God never judges anyone, these lies. Well, you can say, well, what about the story of the flood? It just puts out there, like, here's a conversation piece. Like, I'm not going to debate you on whether God judges people, because that's this abstract idea. And you and I may have completely different ideas about what that means. But we can talk about the story. Like, what do you think that story is showing us? What's the truth package in that story? Or let's say somebody is saying, well, God is so harsh. He has no mercy for anyone. What about the cross? I mean, what do we see in that story? Like, do you see any of God's mercy there on the cross? Like, why would, I can see, like, if you just look at Jesus's perspective, if that death was just Jesus saying, Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass, and God says no. I mean, that looks like harsh judgment, but do you also see the mercy in that? Or, this idea that we should always protect ourselves first, that's really, I have to do what's right for me. I have to put up my own boundaries. Well, what about the Good Samaritan? What was that story? What was Jesus teaching? Was he teaching us to put up boundaries? I mean, that guy took some risk there. If this guy is bloodied on the side of the road, that means there might be someone nearby who would bloody you too. So what is Jesus teaching us in that story, and how can we put that into practice in our lives? So I think pointing to a story is a way to invite others into conversation about something that is not just coming from you. It's got an outside source that has more authority, hopefully, at least for you it does. And you're talking about something with concrete ideas that you can engage versus these abstracts of like truth and justice and mercy and all of these things that people have different ideas about. So it's a really great way to enter into conversation.
But as you're saying all that, I'm thinking, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And if I bring in a picture and I bring in the artist, they're going to point out different things in the story. But if I bring in an art critic, they're going to point out different things in that picture. And as you're sitting here, it's like, oh, you're bringing up things I never thought about. That's why we need to study in community and have these conversations and go, let's talk. You think differently than I do. And we're all looking at the same story, but because of your experience, the way your brain works, there's different truths you're going to pull out than an Erica is, or I'm going to. And it's like, that's why a story is so good, because you can look at it 1,000 times and each time pull out a different lesson or application or truth.
Well, and even if you're looking at that particular story differently than the person you're talking with, at least you're talking about the truth, right? And that is going to resonate. It's going to bring up questions in their minds. I actually sat on the plane or on a plane next to a woman, and we had this really long conversation. She was definitely not a believer, and she was headed over to where was she going? She wanted to go visit Germany, and because she wanted to visit the Holocaust sites, and she also wanted to visit the red light district.
Wow.
And I was
those
like,
are different.
I said, that's very intriguing to me. Why would you pick, why are those your favorite things that you're going to see? And she's like, I'm just intrigued by humanity and what both of these things tell us about humanity. And I said, so what do you think they both tell about humanity? And she was like, I guess I haven't really thought that much about it. And I said, well, can I share what I think they both say? I said, I think both of those are telling us what it looks like when we try to do life without God. When we cast aside his ideas of right and wrong and we decide for ourselves. Hitler was deciding what he thought was right. And it looked, I mean, the whole world agrees right now that was very, very bad. But he was deciding for himself, no, this is really good. And he got a lot of people to agree with him. Now, the red light districts, there are people who are deciding for themselves what is very, very good, for human sexuality, right? And they are defying God's ideas for sex and marriage. And so a lot of pain and suffering that are associated with these red light districts. And so I said, both of those bring me back to a story in the Bible. So I told her the story about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and how this is God decide. He's like, this tree somehow contains the knowledge of what is good for us and what is bad for us. And God wanted that to be off limits. And so when Eve reached for, she wasn't just reaching for fruit. She was reaching for control. She wasn't just rejecting, God's rule, this one off limits tree in the garden. She was rejecting God's rule over her to decide for her what was good and what was right. So anyway, so we had this conversation, and I could tell she was, she was like, okay, I don't, I asked, have you read the Bible? Yeah, I've given it a try before, and it didn't work for me or stuff like that. And then, and so then she turned to me and she's like, I just have one question about this whole, faith thing. And your relationship with God or whatever. And she's like, does he control you?
Wow.
And I said, okay, so it's so interesting because the way that I took that question, I was like, well, that actually relates back to this whole story with the tree. I said, when God was in control, that's when life flourished. Like that's when life was good. And the more that I give God rule and reign over my life, the more my life flourishes. And so I said, what's interesting about me right now is I have a choice because God sent Jesus to die for my sin and to give me this forgiveness. And so now I can walk this new path. I have this freedom. I'm not like chained to my sin, and I can actually give him control. But I have the choice of whether moment by moment, day by day, am I going to be the one who's acting like I'm in control versus him being in control? And she's like, oh, okay. And okay. So then she goes to the bathroom, and then she comes and she sits back down. And so I had been thinking about this whole thing. And I said, I know we're done talking about that whole thing, but I got to tell you something that is so intriguing to me. And she's like, okay. And I said, when you asked that question about, is God controlling you? You were thinking that'd be a really bad thing, right? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, I have a whole different perspective on that now. I think of that as a really, really good thing. And I realized that I answered your question just with that assumption that is a really, really good thing. And I would just invite you to consider like that you think of that as really bad, that God would be controlling you, like he would decide what's good for you and what's bad for you. But I've come to see it in a different way. Like we're looking at the same story of this tree in in this garden, and I'm looking at it like, oh, it would have been so good for her to let God have control over that. And you're looking at that like you would probably still want to take that fruit, because you don't want God to have control. And so I said, just think about like when you go visit that Holocaust museum. And when you go to that red light district, just imagine what it would look like if God was the one who was ruling in these different, realms of the world. So anyway, it's very interesting to me.
Yeah. Did you also tell her you have a book called Control Girl?
I don't think I did. I
Little
thought
plug
about,
right there. Shannon's got a book.
I'm like constantly like, why don't I have business cards? I never have them on me. I think I gave her my name or whatever. I don't think I mentioned I was an author, but I had been at a conference. It was actually a medical, it was like for Christian doctors, and I did a breakout session. And so I had just been at that conference, and they gave everybody this little book. So I'm like, here's a little book. And she's like, okay. And she's put it, I'm like, she's going to throw that in the first trash can she comes upon. But maybe the story, I could imagine that story like taking root in her heart, So, yeah.
But what I like is you're giving us simple ways to share our faith and connect with others.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of kids coming in your yard and going, let me tell you a story. Little kids love stories. I mean, what a neat way for those of us who do interact with people who aren't in the faith yet and go, let me tell you one little thing. Here's just a little story. And just because that brings a connection and it draws you back though.
Yeah. Can I give you one more example?
Yep.
My son this was a few years ago, and he was dealing with something at work. He's probably like 19, 20 years old. And he was, as he was talking about what was going on in the workplace, I was thinking like, I really want to preach a sermon to him. I think he's wrong about some things. I think he's seeing this incorrectly, but I know, that if I do this, he's going to walk out of this room and we're not going to continue the conversation. And so instead I made a very conscious decision, to talk about Gideon and how Gideon, like the odds were all against him, and how, he's the smallest of the smallest tribe. He has no authority. He's like the youngest. I don't remember. I had just studied the story, but I said God was with him, and that's what made the difference, is that God was with him. And so he was like, thanks, Mom. We talked about it a little bit. And then, it was so fun because like the next day I heard him on the phone, and he was retelling someone that story.
Wow.
and reminding them, what God was with Gideon. And I'm like, oh, that's just amazing. Like, that's the power of a story. It just drops the guard down. It lets the truth get in. And then the truth has legs and it goes into other conversations and into other, it captures your imagination and you're still thinking about it the next day. Whereas I guarantee you, if you repreach that sermon, the only thing that the person is rethinking about the next day is like, my mom repreaches the sermon every Sunday, so it's just another way to approach our people that we love and help have meaningful conversations about truth with them.
Having a 17-year-old starting to get into this phase where they definitely have their own opinions, their own perspectives.
She's had her opinions
For a long time. Yeah, she's such a firstborn. But I guess, Shannon, that just hits me hard. Like, I probably all too often fall back into that preaching mode. Like, no, I'm going to tell this is right, this is wrong. And instead start to go, okay, Lord, help me. Give me a story to share with her, because she loves stories. She loves to read.
That's so good.
And just to connect with her that way will be so much better. Because we had a conversation last night about a podcast she was listening, and it's a good podcast, but it's on economics. But she brought in, there was a guest, and I'm like, oh, and the guest has this perspective, and I got on my little soapbox, and I could tell, like, she was like, I know, Mom, I know that's what you think, but what if I had shared a story? Like, what if instead of spouting my opinion, I had listened and shared a story?
Well, and who gave us that lead?
Right.
Who taught us?
God did.
Who did this?
Jesus
who
did this.
that?
Yes.
Because we're just like your daughter. We're embracing all the ideas of the world.
Right.
And we're stumbling into like, believing lies. Really,
Right.
we have an enemy who is feeding us lies, and I have no idea I have no. I would have no opinion about the economics podcast, but like there are definitely lies that are coming in at us, in 100 different directions. And so, how did God respond? He could have given us a book that was like, "Here's the truth, and I want you to memorize the truth, and I'm going to give you all these abstract ideas." And no, He told us stories. He responded with stories, and so we're just following His lead when we do that too.
Right. Well, I think we're going to wrap this up because I think you're coming back again, Shannon, to take us through a story.
Let's do it.
In the Bible.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I think, I'll let you wrap it up, Ronnie.
I'm good. Thanks for joining us. And don't forget, come back to hear. Shannon's going to show us how to do it, what lessons we can learn.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because then the idea is you take it and you apply it and take that story, like Shannon said, put legs on it and walk it somewhere else.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.